this point, in the early days of starting in the work, Word of Faith Christian Center, things started to move so rapidly that it started to move us in directions that we never thought we were going to go into. God opened the door for us to publish the books, just like he told me he wanted me to do. Even though we knew nothing about book publishing or translating, my wife ended up being the translator, and we learned about publishing books and distributing books. The next thing we knew, Peter Hassler had joined us, and Stefan and Monica had joined us, and Bill and Marilyn had joined us, and we were all joining together to see something happen. In 1984, we started a Bible school. Here, I'd never been to Bible school, and now we have a Bible school. And we had that Bible school 13 years with over 800 graduates, helping younger people to get trained to go out and do the work of the ministry, as it's called. Some were pastors, some were working in churches, some were worship leaders. So we were having a part in seeing others reach out with the gift that God had given them. At this time, we also started something we call the Faith Conference, Glaubenskonferenz in German, as we say. And those faith conferences, the first one started in 1985. We didn't know if anybody was going to come. And we didn't have the internet back in those days. We didn't have the way to advertise where you could go out all over the place. We had a very small group where we could advertise. And in spite of those limitations, 1,200 people from all over Germany, Switzerland, Austria came to the first faith conference. We were overwhelmed. The next year, it was 3,000. And after that, every year, we would have 5,000 people coming to the faith conference. I was starting to meet other ministries in other countries. I was traveling to Africa. I was traveling to South America. I was traveling to North America. Suddenly, Mayan and I found ourselves becoming professional ministers. And it's not something that happened like from one day to the next. It kind of takes a hold of you, and you're living in this box, and you forget that there was a world around you that you came out of because you're so busy in this subculture of your church world. And a lot of good was happening. A lot of people were being helped, but we were becoming more and more distant from the world God had called us out of. And then something happened. It was the Seventh Faith Conference. It must be 1991. I've become the professional pastor. And in this last conference, we had a motto, and it was, "Go ye into all the world." And that word world in the Greek original is cosmos. And it doesn't mean geographical world. It means the world where every man lives. And it was like God was using that one scripture to pull us back to where he wanted us to be. I had come out of the world of rock and roll. Mayana had come out of the world of theater. And I remember back then, Stefan, he had come to Christ while he was in India, just trying to blow his brain out on drugs. And all three of us really felt we need to go back to our roots. And that was the beginning of a change for us that changed everything. We began to reevaluate, why are we doing what we're doing, and for who are we doing it? And we began to realize there was so much more that God wanted to do in us and through us for other people, and we needed to get back to our roots. I'm sure some are thinking at this point in the story, being a pastor, being a preacher, what a boring thing. Let me tell you something. Things were happening over here in Europe that were amazing. I remember the first time God allowed me to go into Eastern Europe. For those that are a bit younger, back then, Europe was divided in East and West, and we had what we call the Iron Curtain. And those that lived behind the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe, they were bound by communism. They couldn't come out of Eastern Europe. And it was illegal to talk about Jesus, to talk about faith, to have church. It was something that was a different world back then. And I began to go into Eastern Europe. I went into Romania. I went into Hungary. I went into what was called at that time Yugoslavia. We began to touch people's lives, just like we saw in Western Europe, in Germany, and not only in Germany, but in Switzerland and in Austria. And now we're going into Eastern Europe, going into Eastern Germany, what was called the DDR. And we were finding Christians there, what we call the underground church. I remember first time I went to Hungary, we were supposed to meet the pastor on the street, and we got lost. We showed up 9 hours late, and that pastor stood on the street for 9 hours waiting for us. Now, if you had done that in America or in Western Europe, that pastor would have been mad. This pastor was full of joy. He was so thankful that we came. The people there had so little, and yet they shared everything with you. And it made us feel very humbled that these people would receive us with such joy and such thanksgiving. But it was like Bible days. It was like reading the book of Acts, only we're living it out. Going and visiting people in their homes, sharing the gospel, praying with the sick, seeing God help people suddenly get healthy. It was an amazing time. And the experience of being with Christians in Eastern Europe definitely had a major impact on my life. And I'm so thankful God allowed me to do that. Towards the end of that period before communism fell, some of Christians in Eastern Germany were daring to put together a conference. It was held in the very famous Gethsemane Church in Berlin, on the eastern side of Berlin. And they wanted to have a faith conference like they had heard about that we were doing in Western Germany. So they put this together. And now they couldn't invite us to speak. So we had to happen to come across the border, happen to hear the music, just happen to come in the church and recognize we knew some people, and they invited us to greet the people. Well, my greeting went 90 minutes, and I talked about the importance of prayer. I found out later the Stasi, which was the secret police, were up in the balcony, and they had their machine guns pointed at us, and some were writing down every word we ever talked. Just recently, a professor who's doing a study about what happened at that time asked me if he could use some of the documents he found from what they call the Stasi-Akten, that he could take that and use it for his studies. And I was more than glad to say, you can use it. And I felt, I guess, a bit proud that the things we were doing even caught the attention of the communist government at that time, because there were so many people being touched. On that first faith conference, 900 people came in the Gethsemane Church, a Lutheran church, to hear the gospel. And things began to shake all over Europe. It was only a short time after that political change was happening. But let me tell you something. Before the political change, there was a spiritual change going on. People began to find faith. People began to find hope in prayer. People began to pray for change, and God answered their prayers. What happened through that last faith conference with Go Ye into all the world, and the next few years, was a process for us to touch again the world that actually we lived in when we came to Jesus. And it was not easy, because for me personally, the first thought I had was, what are my colleagues going to say? What are my other pastor friends going to say? I was more concerned about my image than really finding out what God wanted to do in my life and through my life. I didn't realize how religious I had become. And I think the best way I can describe becoming a religious is when you're more concerned about yourself and your own image rather than what really pleases God and how your life can be a blessing for others. And it doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in. But suddenly I found myself in a situation where I realized I need to make a decision and break out of the mold I had put myself in. And I'll never forget it. At the same time, there was a Christian performing artist, a contemporary Christian artist. Her name was Janie Grine. When I had become a Christian in the 70s, she was one at the forefront of contemporary Christian music. And here she came to Germany, and I got to meet with her. And meeting Janny was a very special thing for Mayana and I because her music meant so much to us when we were young Christians. I think we listened to her album every single day. And now she's in our home, she's staying with us, and I'm talking with her. And God was dealing with her about some of the same things. Eastern Europe had just opened up, and during this time, we had seen so much happen politically in Europe. I remember Janny had asked me to come to America to play on one of her recordings. And I was very nervous because I had really been in a studio with professional musicians in a long time. It's been over 15 years. And I remember going to Florida to be with Janny. I walk in the studio and she introduces me to a guy named Mike Dacey. Mike Dacey was part of what they call the Wrecking Crew in LA. He was probably one of the most famous studio guitar players at the time. When I lived in LA, I knew his name. He had played with Elvis Presley. He had played with Simon and Garfunkel, the Mamas and the Papas, the Monkees, the Beach Boys. Jackson 5, Michael Jackson. There wasn't anybody in America that recorded in LA that probably Mike didn't work with at some time or another. And now I'm standing with him in the studio. But I tell you what, we hit it off real well. The first song we recorded, the first take went 13 minutes, of which they used 9 to make that first record called Signs and Wonders. And it was like being back home. I knew I was where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to do. And so it was real difficult at this time to bridge the gap of still pastoring, because I didn't stop pastoring the church, and reaching out as a musician and using the music to touch other people. I remember when Janny was staying with us, she had to go back to the States for a few weeks. And she said, "Is it okay if I leave my guitar here?" She had a beautiful classical Martin guitar from the 60s, had a great sound. And I was so happy to have her guitar. One morning I woke up and picked up her guitar and I was playing. And a song came out that enabled me to tell people what happened to me that night that Jesus entered my bedroom. It's called Long Road to Heaven. And that song I've been able to sing in so many different situations, in so many different countries and cultures, and tell people through the song what God did in my life. Had I not had the courage to get outside of the box, to pick up my guitar, to begin to write songs, and to begin to even dare to perform those songs and to sing those songs, there are so many people I would have never touched. It wasn't only that I was helping others, God was helping me. He was pulling me out of an image I had put myself into and helping me to be the person He really created me to be.